Hey everybody, I'm Jenny. Today's video is all about Cricut mats. So everything you ever wanted to know, the standard grip mat, the light grip mat, the fabric mat, the card mat. I'll be going over mats for every single machine from the Joy, the Explorer Air 2, and the Maker. I'll be teaching you tips on how to clean them, how to store them, what materials to use, basically everything you'd ever want to know about mats. So this video is part of my Cricut Basics and Beyond series, where I'm teaching everything you need to know to become a Cricut Pro. Okay, first let's talk about the mats for the Cricut Joy, this cute little guy. Now, one of the mats that is unique to the Cricut Joy is the Cricut card mat. So Cricut has these insert cards. It's the only mat that has two flaps. You take a card and you slide the back side back here. I have a whole tutorial on making cards on my website if you want to check it out. But that's the card mat. It's meant to work with the Cricut Joy. It does not work with the Cricut Maker or the Cricut Explorer Air 2, but I have seen people hack it where they tape it to like one of these bigger mats and then they're able to use it. I have not done that, but you're welcome to search that and see. So that's the Cricut card mat. It's just used for cards. The one thing I have to say about it is with most of my other mats, I've been able to clean them and use them for years. This only lasts a certain number of cards. I'd say maybe 20 to 30. I've tried cleaning it. It does not get re-sticky. You can tell when it is, when you can't use it anymore because your card just won't cut like this one, the one I showed you. It just doesn't cut. It starts to slide around and it's time for a new mat. They are fairly inexpensive. However, it's a bummer that they don't last longer. So that is the one downside of the card mat. Now, there's these other mats that you use with the Cricut Joy, and these are only if you're not using Cricut Smart Materials. So with the Cricut Joy, Cricut released a line of smart materials. So they have like the Smart Label, Smart Vinyl, and Smart Iron-On. That means you don't need to use a mat with these. You simply load these into your machine without the mat, and then it cuts it. So that's a pretty cool thing about that. And then if you're not going to be using smart materials, that's when you'd use the mat. You can also, if your smart material happens to be too short, you can put it onto the mat. So let me show you. So if you have regular vinyl, regular iron-on, things like that, that's when you'll use the mats. So the standard grip green mat there's two sizes. There's also two sizes of the light grip. I don't have that right now. But the standard grip is what you'd use for iron-on, vinyl, cardstock, things like that the Joy can cut. Now for thinner materials, lighter cardstock, printer paper, things like that, you would use the light grip mat. Those are the Joy mats. And yeah, that's all for the Cricut Joy. Okay, let's talk about these mats. These are the mats that you use for the Cricut Explorer Air 2 and the Cricut Maker. The names kind of are kind of give you a hint of what they're used for, but blue is light grip. That is for thin, lightweight materials. You'll use this for like printer paper, vellum, light cardstock, thin scrapbook paper, washi sheets, construction paper. Anything that is more delicate, that's what you use your light grip mat for. Then the green is the standard grip mat. Use this for like regular cardstock, iron-on, vinyl, and iron-on is also called heat transfer vinyl. You'll use this for the infusible ink sheets, faux leather, and also I like to use the Cricut felt on this. The Cricut felt is more paper-like than other felts, so that is different, but the Cricut felt for that. Then there's the strong grip mat, and as the name implies, it's the strongest grip. It's for the heaviest materials. So like you'll want to use like glitter cardstock, chipboard, poster board, mat board, magnet materials if you're making your own magnets, corrugated cardboard, real leather, and also basswood. Now with any of these materials, a lot of the thicker ones, for example, basswood requires multiple cuts, and so you do need to tape down your material in addition to using the strong grip mat. This just makes sure that as it's doing all those cuts, it doesn't slide at all because you want the cuts to come out perfectly. So when you use this mat, you will also be using tape most of the time if you're using this. Now the pink mat is the fabric grip mat. And obviously you use this for fabric, and I also use this for felt and for crepe paper. So you'll use it in the Cricut Explorer Air 2, you'll use it for bonded fabrics, and in the Cricut Maker you can use it for all other types of fabrics. Fabric Grip Mat has a special kind of adhesive compared to the other mats. They always recommend with this one, let me get this off. They recommend not touching it with your hands because the oils on your hands can affect this adhesive. So they always say if you're taking fabric off to use their tools. I found that when I cut on this, it always seems to cut into the mat. You can kind of see that. This mat starts peeling. I don't cut fabrics too often, but I have noticed that. One of the other things is the Fabric Grip Mat, it tends to get strings and things from fabric. And again, they say don't use your fingers to pull those off. The strings won't affect the cutting. Just leave it on there. That bugs me though, so I do clean it off, and I also use tweezers to get it off. Another thing, since I use this a lot for felt will really get the little fuzzies all over it. So if you have felt and you put it on, let's see if we'll, this one's not as bad, but you'll notice that it gets the felt fuzzies. So one trick that people use is they take 12 by 12 transfer tape, peel off the backing, and then you're going to stick this sticky side up onto your Fabric Grip Mat. Okay, so they do that, and now you still have the sticky transfer tape here, and then they'll put their fabrics on. Then once they cut their fabrics, get them off of the cut, they can remove it. Any of the fuzzies go onto there, and then they'll just remove this whole piece of transfer tape. Now I have found that this is successful to keep your mat clean, but you can't do a ton of cuts. So if you're gonna, like, let's say you're gonna put this on, cut out some different felt flowers, I would take it off right after that. Do not leave it on your mat. Otherwise, sometimes it can get really stuck to your mat, and it won't come off if the cuts have gone through, and you'll have all these little pieces of transfer tape. So I'd recommend that each time you use a new piece of transfer tape. But that is one tip on how to keep your Fabric Grip Mat nice and clean. So let's just take that off. Okay, I'll put that back on. Now that we've talked about mats, let's talk about some tips for getting materials onto your mat. So a lot of materials, like this is infusible ink, they're really, really curly. It's hard to keep them flat. You'll try to like get it on there and they'll, they'll just get everywhere, and it kind of can be frustrating. So let me show you a trick of what to do. So if you have your machine, let's take off this protective cover. You're just gonna slide your mat under the machine, and then you'll just start with the tip or the top, and you'll put that down on your mat. And you see, so it's not sticking to your mat, and you can make sure you get it straight, line it up. Like, so I have it a little crooked. I'm going to redo that again. So this protects it, because if you touch infusible ink to your mat, it will rip off the infusible ink. Having your mat underneath protects your infusible ink, so you're not going to accidentally stick it on there. You just want to line up the top really well, make sure it's straight. Okay, and then you're just going to gently unroll it and pull it out. And then that makes your material on there really great. So that's one tip I have with the really curly materials on how to get them on nice and straight. And again, make sure your material is pressed on there really firmly so you can get your cleanest cut. If you put your material on and it's a little bit loose, it might move, and then your cut would not be as great. Now here's the other important thing. When you make a cut and you're all done and you've unloaded this from your machine, you want to peel the mat away from the material. So you're peeling like this, because if you peel like this, it's going to make your material all curly and make it all wacky and weird. So you need to peel your mat away from your material. So that's a tip on how to remove your material. The other thing I wanted to point out is a lot of people will have trouble, let's move this over here, they'll have trouble with their cuts being off and they don't understand why. When you are loading your mat, you want to make sure that you push it all the way up to these rollers. So if you push it, just like if you have it in there, you can hit this and it might not be all the way up there, and so it's going to be a little bit off. You don't want that to happen. You want to make sure you firmly push your mat against the rollers and then you hit the load mat button. That's going to load your mat correctly so that you get the best cut. So again, make sure, and here's unload, make sure that you're not just hanging your mat in there and hitting the load button, because it will still put the mat in, but can you see the difference of where the mat ended up? It did not go back as far. So let me show you with it firmly pressed up. I have it firmly pressed up and then I'm hitting the load button, and see how much further my mat went back? So always make sure that you have your mat all the way up there so that you can get the correct cut. Another tip I have for you is some people find that you see, it's kind of hard to see from the upward angle, but when you load a mat in, they don't have, some machines have little things that'll stick out so that keep your mat flat. A lot of people just use an empty roll of vinyl. I don't have an empty one right now, but they'll just put that underneath, and that as you do the cut, that will just kind of roll with it since it's cylinder. And then, so let's put that in there. So that will roll with it and that will kind of keep your mat flat, and some people prefer that for a better cut. Okay, let me show you an example cut. So I have this is deluxe paper, it's loaded onto my mat. I'm going to make sure my mat is firmly up against the rollers and then load it. Again, this is especially better for the longer mats, but you can put this roll of paper or vinyl underneath. Then you're going to hit cut. Okay, and then we'll unload the mat. Get that out of the way. Okay, so removing materials from your mat. So as I talked about before, you should always remove the mat from the material. So you're going to flip it over and you're going to remove it like this. So what this does is it keeps my paper nice and flat. If I pull this off, a lot of times you'll end up with a curled paper. So the same thing, when you have your cuts, you just want to remove them like this to keep them nice and flat and straight. These are probably kind of small, but if you pull them off that way, a lot of times you'll curl the paper or bend it. So again, you want to remove the mat from your design, not this way. You have the tendency to want to take it off this way. Don't do that because you'll end up bending your paper. So here's the two that I pulled off. These are the ones that I removed the mat from, so they're still nice and flat. So we've talked about all the different mats, what you can use them on. I've shared some of my tips. So then there's the larger mats. So these are the exact same as the smaller mats. You'll use them in the Cricut Maker or the Cricut Explorer Air 2. It's for when you want to do larger cuts. Excuse me. So you'll have the 12 by 24 mats. This is the light grip, the standard grip, the strong grip, and the fabric mat. So again, this is if you want to make larger cuts with your machine, you'll use these mats. Same materials, just larger cuts. One of the questions I see asked the most is, how do I clean my Cricut mat? So I have had lots of these mats for years and years. As you can see, this one is the old mat with the flowers on it, and the newer mats don't have that flower pattern. But let me show you so you can kind of see this mat. It just kind of looks sturdy. I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but it does not look great. So some people actually submerge their mats in dish soap and water, scrub them down and let them dry. I don't do that. The way I've always cleaned my mats is I just use wipes. So you can use a baby wipe or like a Lysol Clorox wipe, a cleaning wipe. You want one that's not too wet. And then this is all you're gonna do. You're gonna use a circular motion and clean off the gunk on your mat. You are pressing down kind of firmly because you want to get off the gunk. Oh, I should have showed you before. So this is kind of, see, my mat's not super sticky because it needs to be cleaned. Like this side's like not very sticky at all. So we'll see how sticky we can get it once we clean it. So. But as you do that, you'll see like you'll see yourself picking up. It's all like the paper dust and other junk and debris that gets on your mat. Again, I'm just using a circular motion. I'm putting some firm pressure on my mat. Kind of go up and down too, but the circular motion I feel like is what gets the most kind of gunk off of there. And then we'll do this side. You can see all this stuff that's coming off. Okay, now once you've cleaned it, it won't feel sticky at all. See how it's not sticking? It needs to dry. So don't put your protective cover back on yet. Where did my cover go? So don't put this back on yet. It needs to dry. So you can set them out, let it dry, but as long as it still has you can see wet streaks, it needs to dry. While we're waiting for that to dry, so you can see if it gets re-sticky. Another tip is how to store your mats. As you notice, there's this little hanger at the top of your mats. A lot of people use just like the command hooks. Fits perfectly, and you can hang them up on the side of your crafting area. So just like that. It's kind of hard to see from above, but yeah. The other thing too is if you have a hook that you store your mats on, when you take off your protective sheet, you can hang it on the hook so that way you don't lose it or it gets dusty itself, so hang it up on the hook. I actually don't love command hooks because they always fall down on me, so I would recommend getting a hook that you can screw in to your wall or to the side of a cabinet, just that it's about this size because that's what works. But yeah, I had all my mats on a command hook like this. It did fall down. Some people have success with it. Maybe I just have too many mats. So I prefer one that screws in, but if you don't want to have damage, you can use a command hook. And that is a great way to store your mats. Okay, let's see if this one is dry. So yeah, let's try that out. Okay, see, so it's much stickier than it was before. Before I couldn't even, when I would touch it, my hands couldn't pick it up. But you might find when you clean a mat that now this green mat is not as sticky as it once was. Still works great as a blue light grit mat. So again, you could cross this off up here and just put blue to remind yourself or keep it in a certain area. But this still will work great for other things. Even maybe if vinyl and iron-on don't stick as great, you can use it for cardstock. I hope you found this video helpful and you learned everything you wanted to know about Cricut mats, how to clean them, how to store them, what materials to use, tips on taking off your materials, how to load them into your machine correctly, all that. So I hope you learned that. I hope you feel great about it. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. Again, this is part of my Cricut Basics and Beyond series, so I hope you'll watch the other videos if you're a beginner. Make sure to like and subscribe to my channel. Thanks.